What was the problem that OYO was trying to solve for?
Ritesh also had come from a small city in India and he had traveled and he could relate to the challenges of basically a budget Indian traveler. The other side was when we started meeting folks who used to run these small hotels. They had these assets and investments that they basically did not know what to do with. The combination of these two pain points was the real insight.
There was a strong MG requirement even in the model that OYO operated. Was it to block and avoid competition coming into that particular hotel, or what was the reason for that?
Of course, there was a lot of competition at some point of time. There were, more than 20 funded startups. There was a lot of action, pretty much, a lot of companies raising money doing the same thing. So moving fast and getting to the partner quickly meant that, you would use minimum guarantee as a tool or you would use partial inventory as a tool.
Do you think there is an opportunity to build a zero commission travel business?
There is absolutely an opportunity there. Zero commission business models get created over a period of time and a lot of things have to go right. So how you get there will be a real challenge, because in hospitality it is basically table stakes that you have pricing parity. You cannot be a platform that is discounting or selling cheaper.
If a founder were to come to you, what could be one or two areas that you will advise them to build in?
I think
affordable hospitality has always been a challenge in India. Till about 10 years back, it always stood for unreliable service, uncertainty of booking, and so on. And that's when OYO stepped in as a brand. Today we have among us Abhinav Sinha, who joined OYO about 11 years back in 2014, which was a very young startup at that time. Abhinav's background, did engineering from IIT Kharagpur, ITC, MBA from Harvard, spent about 5 years at BCG in US, and then came back to join a young startup called OYO as a COO, and then over time became the global CEO and global CPO as well. Welcome, Abhinav, on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure, Rahul.
Yeah. And the good part is Abhinav has also recently moved to Bangalore. So welcome to the city as well.
Thank you.
So Abhinav, let's start by a very interesting, and I think always there's a question on, how people's journeys, professional journey you go through. You were at BCG for 5 years in US. I'm sure a lot of exciting opportunities there. You decided to make two big moves. One is to move back to India. Second is to join a very young startup at that time. Like, what was the reason of making these two big shifts?
So, Rahul, I think you laid it out very well. So let me start by saying that these two moves were different and isolated, so it made it a little easier for me. The background is that before I started off at BCG, during my business school time is when I got exposed to entrepreneurship. Started a food tech venture in 2007 with some friends, and it did not go very far. Worked with a medical devices company, and all of my second year, most of my credits were actually field work, working for this startup. It was a medical devices startup run by an MIT professor. So I had exposure to entrepreneurship, always wanted to be in India and do something entrepreneurial. So the first step was I first quit BCG, moved from the US back to India. And then took some time, was exploring what I would like to do, building something of my own was on the cards as well. And then, as fate would have it, I ran into a very, very good friend, Maninder, who was at Lightspeed, and he was making his first investment as a VC into OYO. So that's how I got introduced to Ritesh, and Ritesh was 18 then, just a bundle of energy just like he is now, and really amazing, great ideas, and we hit it off. So it worked out well for me. I started off at OYO. They were just pivoting from Oracle to OYO, so it was a great moment for me to start. So I literally opened the third hotel at OYO and sort of built out the playbook together and scaled the company with him. So that's how it happened.
So maybe given that you've seen the journey from day one, we'll go deeper into some of, decisions that one took at OYO. But we'll start from day one. What was the problem that OYO was trying to solve for? And what was the insight, and how did, at least in the initial days, how did you go about figuring out a solution to that problem?
Yeah. So, as with all startups, you always start with a problem statement at least being very clear, and you should be able to feel the problem statement, right? The good news was Ritesh also had come from, a small city in India, and he had traveled and he had seen India as it is, and he could relate to the challenges of basically a budget Indian traveler, right? And from a budget perspective, those times, if you want a predictable stay, pretty much, there was hardly anything available below, I would say, 3,000 rupees per night, right? That below that price point, there wasn't a predictable offering in the market. And that just seemed intuitively very high for a, small-time businessman traveling to build their business, or a family taking a vacation, or, some adults traveling on a pilgrimage. It just intuitively felt that, this price point is high. And then we started realizing the other side was even more important when we started meeting folks who used to run these small hotels. So these were basically large asset owners, and they had these assets and investments that they basically did not know what to do with. So they used to run them as hotels, and it was very, very, maybe unprofessional is not the word to use, but it was not professionally managed, right? And that basically meant that they were leaving a lot of money on the table. They were not able to train the staff properly. They did not have the right technology and tools. And I think the combination of these two pain points was the real insight, that you could do something for the consumer and build something for them while really solving problem for what I would say a very large asset class which existed but was not part of the formal economy, if you can say.
And I remember in those days, there were a couple of startups, few who believed in a full stack model. They may not own the property, but they would believe that I will rent it out, I'll run it. Fab Hotel and Tribo were a few examples. And then OYO decided to start with an asset-light model, right? Like, what were how did you decide on one of the two, as in why not do a full stack and give a real good experience to the customer?
Yeah. So, the way it happened actually, those days where early days are always very fast paced. We started and we were the first in the market, right? And we were the full stack model. We were always running a full stack model. Yeah. So we were Gurgaon based startup, and all of our hotels were full stack models where, basically we would do everything from recruiting the staff to training the staff to very actively involved in managing the hotel day to day, right? So the technology was still getting built. We were basically a very good distribution engine for the hotel partners. And then of course came along a lot of competition, right? So we were always asset light in a way because, we were not really owning the asset, of course. We were also not, leasing the asset, and we were also not giving any minimum guarantee. So in every technical way also, it was a purely asset light model, but it was full stack. But we owned the entire inventory, and our definition, which we came up with, was very clear, that we would own the entire inventory and we would own pricing control, right? So entire distribution would happen through us, and we would control pricing. So when you control pricing and distribution, we understood that the leverage that you have in delivering value for the asset is the maximum, right? That was the core insight. And how you do that over time, we developed multiple channels, but it basically started with selling on the phone, right? You were selling through phone calls, right? Those were the days. But then, of course, competition came in, and different people sort of tried to adjust at different stages of this, what you call a full stack. But pretty much everyone understood that what we defined as full stack was extremely critical. You need to own the entire inventory, and you need to control the pricing. And need to control the pricing for us became stronger and stronger as we built very strong direct distribution channels. And that is what I would look back and say that, some others couldn't do, and therefore that control of pricing did not play out as they would have liked.
And there is always, at least I have that perception, that there was a strong MG requirement even in the model that OYO operated. Sometimes you will do partial room blocking with an MG, or a full hotel with an MG. How, was it to block and avoid competition coming into that particular hotel, or what was the reason for that?
Yeah, so I think you are right first, right? There were different phases where we tried partial inventory, and there was a time when, I would say up to 10% of our inventory was on some form of guarantee as well, right? It happened because of two reasons, and we had a lot of learnings also, which I would love to talk about. Primary reason was, of course, there was a lot of competition at some point of time. There were, more than 20 funded startups, sort of, which we would like to call as copycats, but there was a lot of action, pretty much, a lot of companies raising money doing the same thing. So moving fast and getting to the partner quickly meant that, you would use minimum guarantee as a tool, or you would use partial inventory as a tool. I think this was a very small period, maybe lasted for 6 to 9 months, right? But was talked about for a very long period of time, right? Because once this competition went away, very quickly the remaining players migrated to full stack models, right? And we absolutely did. Minimum guarantee, I think, took longer to go away. There was another reason why minimum guarantee was there as a tool in the market to get. So our job was to create liquidity for the asset owner, right? And there were some assets that already saw decent liquidity, right? They were not running at operational loss. These were primarily assets, you would say that, they had certain characteristics. They were front street assets, high street assets, right? High visibility to walk-in footfall. So to use these assets and bring these assets in the platform, we are very confident you will deliver value.
Right.
You will increase their RevPAR, you will deliver more liquidity. But to get them in, you needed a certain sort of tool, which minimum guarantees became that tool. And that, in my opinion, also was maybe a couple of years picture, right? We used that for 2 years and very limited inventory because it was for the high street hotels only, right? And then, once you were able to show benefit to these hotels, it was not needed for other high street hotels in the same micro market.
Interesting.
But when you would open a new micro market, you might use that as a tool again, right? So that was the nuance around, the partial inventory and guarantee. But the guarantee had a lot of effects, which, we were, I would say, the first ones to learn in a pretty unorganized space. And one of the most important was we understood that, minimum guarantee works in a very strange way. Minimum guarantee, we understood that it basically distorted the operators, your business partners, mindset towards working with you, right? So for example, there would be an operator running 3 assets. They would say that, I have a high street asset, I have a minimum guarantee from OYO, right? Or from X. Now they would say that as an entrepreneur, all my time is dedicated to asset 2 and asset 3.
Interesting.
Because now I have to focus, and this, I have a guarantee.
I know I'll get it.
So I'm focusing all my time and energy and entrepreneurial bandwidth to 2 and 3. Then that model where you need the entrepreneur's energy and bandwidth to run the operations well would not work very well for the asset where you thought it should work the best.
Interesting.
Right? So
how did you solve that?
It was one of the hardest things to solve, right? You would put in checks and balances, then you get into a cat and mouse game in terms of, how you are monitoring everything, and that, you have more clauses there. But I would say that that's one of the toughest models to make it work. If there is a dedicated operator, dedicated asset, that's where it worked well, right? And you have incentives aligned to do more and more business. But if you have multiple hotels or even multiple interests, now imagine an entrepreneur who has 1 hotel, but has like 2 other factories. So again, the same mindset comes into play, saying that, here my break-even is guaranteed. So my time as an entrepreneur, which is critical for the partnership, goes to the 2 factories. Things like these. But maybe outside of this, I'll share, MG historically has had very different sort of impacts, and I will share an anecdote with you. I worked for ITC, as you know, so this was a factory role. So I worked for a factory in Munger. This is 120 years old factory, started by the British, right? And they had a minimum guarantee system, right? And this was called Bahali, right? In the labor unions, you will hear this. So Bahali, what does Bahali mean? Bahali means that, if you retire, your child gets a job. So it's a certain minimum guarantee for labor, right? So it helps you retain talent. It helps you sort of negotiate better. I'm sure there would be some benefits. We saw none of it. We saw only the fallout, basically. And it has amazing, or rather I would say, scary social fallouts as well. What we saw play out over generations. Now think about 120 years of this, and finally we got rid of it, I think in 2006 or 7 through negotiations. But what happened was the perverse incentive. Families used to say that I have 3 sons, right? Ek ka job to ITC mein pakka hai. That person will not go to school. So I will invest on the other 2 only. So what happened socially, you were stuck with the talent that is like least educated, and that talent hates you because that person did not get education because of you. And then this is like a perfect opposite of match made in heaven. So, and then you are stuck for 30 years. with that. So, we came from, so I had that understanding and we were quick to figure out that this is not working. So we were able to control the damage and have sort of incentive structures in place, checks and balances in place, but it's very difficult to run.
Interesting. And then few years later, OYO also made a move into Townhouse brand, which is more like a, you don't own the asset, but you lease the asset and you run it full-fledged as your brand. What again, was there an attempt to move to a slightly more premium segment? Was it to build a better OYO brand? Or was there real good business out there? As in, what went behind that decision?
Yeah, that Townhouse was a, I would say, great intervention from OYO at that stage. As we were running our assets, we very quickly realized that there is we were playing typically in the 1,000 to 2,000 rupee price point, right? And we very quickly realized there is a very large customer base that is coming on OYO and that is booking on OYO, that is ready to pay us higher. The product that they need is not available at the density that, you really can serve them well. So that was the basic need that we identified, that people are ready to pay 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. The density of that product in our platform, when you're working with assets that already exist, maybe is there on high streets, maybe is there on certain locations, but the density needed to really keep this customer logged in and get a fair share of wallet is not there. So that was the sort of whole genesis of Townhouse. We realized that, your asset light model, of course, worked really well when you get an underlying asset of that quality, right? And that was the challenge because there were very limited assets at that point of time. You're talking about, 11 years back of that quality or 10 years back of that quality. And therefore, we basically identified assets and identified partners who had the right mindset, assets which had the right potential. Either the location was great or the underlying asset needed minimum capex investment. We got into partnerships with hotel owners where they primarily made bulk of the capex investment, right? And as a step ahead, what we did was basically the real innovation was we came in with a playbook which basically standardized how different assets with different layouts, with different structures could still look and feel very similar, right? Experience-wise, now you see sort of a lot more of that, but townhouses with their distinctive sort of grey facade and sort of red door, right? They became very distinctive, and the experience also, we went through to the times where we identified manager at the hotel was a very critical element of ensuring customer experience. We would hire and train managers and then transfer to the payroll of the operator, right? Staff would get trained in our offices, in our local offices in every city. So you went that step ahead and it delivered really impeccable customer experience. Repeat rates were almost 2 times better, right, compared to the rest of the network. So fascinating economics because of that. It was just very heavy hard work and heavy lifting in terms of, the contracts that you would do, the assets you would identify. I think the scale was also unbelievable, where at some point of time, it basically became very clear they started emerging. Townhouse became the choice for corporate India as well. A lot of offline sales was a very big investment which we made given Townhouse, right? So we doubled down on that at some point of time. Almost 15-20% of our demand was coming from offline sales because of the Townhouse brand.
I used to be a loyal customer in 2016-17 when we were raising our first fund, and very frequent travels to Delhi, Bombay.
Happy to hear that.
I think the other unique thing OYO did in those early days, I think it was one of the first consumer company from India to go global. And it did go really global, as in lots of countries, right? Was there again, is it just an ambition to become a global brand? Were there a lot of white spaces you found? How differently these markets behave from what India was?
It's a great question. I will take a step back and say that while we operated in India, we realized that we built a certain set of capabilities because of just being a new age company, right? And because of that, we were able to challenge certain sort of existing notions the way budget hospitality had run so far. So one of a few of those capabilities, for example, we understood the power of controlling pricing, right? If you are able to control pricing, you have significant leverage, and a standalone entrepreneur, they find it very difficult to bring all the pricing tools, machine learning capabilities to the table, and therefore you leave a lot of value on the table, right? But getting that needs a certain type of understanding, a certain type of selling process, a certain type of contract that you sign. So, your business development is catered towards getting full inventory control, and full pricing control, right? So that process itself was an innovation in terms of how you go about it, right? And then how you execute on it, the way your pricing engine works, the way your marketing stack works, right? The way basically your promotional stacks are layered one top of the other, the way your customer segmentation works, everything was different, catered primarily towards direct distribution. And from this direct distribution, we learned and built stacks around pricing and promotions and marketing for the third-party online distribution as well, OTAs basically, right? Now, when we looked at this capability, we basically saw that you look at the capability stack and then you look at the budget hotels outside the country. So it started with Indonesia, and we realized that, you know, the entire capability stack in the budget hotel is missing. And to top it all, the underlying structure of budget hotel is very similar to that in India, right? Then we looked at UK, and which is a very advanced market, and we saw that especially in London, you go to London and we saw that again, the whole stack for budget hotels was very, very different, being run primarily by asset owners, right? And there was a large, you know, in London itself, from a number of hotels perspective, about 60% of the hotels, though smaller in size, but 60% of the standalone hotels were still independently owned and operated. So that for us was, of course, significantly lower than 98%, which was the case in India. But for a UK market, that was still very, very different. So we took that as an experiment and saw that, you know, we were able to create value. The question is, can you create value and increase RevPAR, right? And it worked out well. And the US was, again, very similar in thought process. We realized that about 50% of the assets are again independently owned and managed, do not have this pricing and promotion stack.
Despite those chain hotels and inns that exist out there.
You take the chains out, the remaining 50% we are talking about. Some of the chains also, you know, if I can say with all humility, you know, where I would say, you know, our stack was significantly better than what they had. And this was the stack that we built from our understanding in India. A large part of that, I would say, a large part of that rode on sort of India's movement to mobile. Right? India was off the blocks, and, you know, you were talking about 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, this period, just, you know, every customer in India moved to mobile. So we built a stack that ran well on mobile, and as we went to some of these markets, Indonesia was following India. US and UK also, you know, the demand patterns were shifting and becoming more on mobile, from desktop to, from web to app was happening as we went and we saw. So a lot of learnings we had were sort of, you know, applicable there. UK was also similar.
And in all these geographies, was it budget hotel as the value prop, or you found some other customer needs that you could cater to?
Primarily budget hotels. Primarily budget hotels. We basically looked at which is the segment where we can deliver significantly higher value, right? So we talk about always an equilibrium. There is an equilibrium which exists in every market, which is basically between location, quality, and price, right? And if you can fundamentally alter the equilibrium, right, deliver a better price at the same location and quality, or deliver a better quality at the same location and price, you know, you basically create a significant impact in the market. In US, we saw in the economy segment, these were hotels. Think about hotels along major highways, think about hotels right outside the downtown areas, and we clearly found an opportunity there.
Got it, got it. And you also had, I think, in Europe, like this vacation home business. So were they also catering to the same customer segment, or was it a different need and different customer segment?
So vacation homes business was slightly different. I would say, again, centered more around our capability.
Okay.
Vacation homes business is a different business because it caters to you know, vacation needs of customers and, you know, families traveling. Very different from the typical sort of you know, business traveler centered OYO demand that we have in, say, India or Indonesia, right? And what we saw there was you have these vacation homes. These are alternative assets, right? And they are pretty much vacant all through the year. And then during peak vacation season is when the customer or the home owner monetizes these assets, right? And sells them on different platforms. Europe is pretty ahead because from, I would say, 30, 40 years, they have had companies that aggregate these vacation homes and sort of do the operations and marketing and distribution, right? But they run on very old school sort of pricing and marketing and promotion stacks. So for us, this was a great case where, there is no need to go and create the market. Right? The market is there. The owners understand what value you can bring. What we are saying is we can do the job much better than what is currently happening. Right? And that's where acquisition also became a very, very viable road for us. You can basically get a certain set of assets and significantly improve their monetization. And that's what happened. In fact, I would say that, most of our acquisitions over a period of 2 years, you typically increase their RevPAR by about 25-30% or more, right? And that for a business which has been sort of there for a while is a very, very big deal, and that attracts more homeowners, that enables you to build more direct demand on top of it, and you become sort of preferred partners of OTAs, and all of that happens.
There would you compete with people like Airbnb, or they are in a very different segment?
Airbnb doesn't operate and own exclusive access to inventory, right? So they are always partners. So in Europe, they are very, very big partners alongside Booking.com and sort of other local distribution sites. So we would partner with them to distribute on their platform,
very interesting.
right? And because we understand, again, Airbnb is a very, very good partner, of course, amongst others, where they are also new generation. They are also sort of a mobile first distribution stack. So the type of capabilities we intuitively build works very well for their platform.
Very interesting. And maybe my last question on OYO specifically. Last few years have been a bit different for OYO. There has been, if I can call it, some kind of reset. Would you be open to sharing what has led to that decision? Does that mean that certain markets are unprofitable, so get out of it? Like what?
Yeah.
How has that gone about?
Yeah. See, for sure, I think COVID was the time frame which brought about the big reset, and we came during COVID, and we definitely came out of it with a very clear focus on growth and profitability both.
Okay.
Right. And we achieved that with a very purpose-driven mindset, and we prioritized 3 or 4 areas, right? The first was we basically prioritized markets where the gross margins were pretty high, right? And we cut back investments from markets where the gross margin story was still to be proven. Sometimes it was still to be proven in the whole market. Sometimes it was still to be proven in our business model, and we basically dialed down. So focus on markets where gross margin story was very, very clear, right? And gladly it included sort of most of our markets, the gross margin story was very good, right? We were very clear because gross margin is a story of all about, contract level, how are you doing? Second thing that we focused on was basically technology, right? We had always leveraged technology primarily for growth, right? So now came a time when with the mindset, you started leveraging technology for, your profitability as well. So how do you think about your contribution margin? How do you think about efficiency in customer service? How do you think about, your central organization in building capabilities? So a lot of the technology bandwidth going there meant that we were able to basically, significantly alter the cost structure in many places. So when you look at the P&L. And the third part was just leveraging India. We realized that we had a global cost structure, and we had not taken the opportunity to really ask this question of, what all can we do from India? And that question, when it was raised, we realized that, you can pretty much do everything from India. So technology teams, which were at some point of time present in like 4 different countries, came all to India. Finance teams, major concentration, like 95% of the team in India. HR, like almost entire thing operating from India. Your revenue functions, everything from India, right? Your marketing, everything from India. Your operations, customer experience, customer service. Now with GenAI, of course, even the remaining like last mile of 10-15% is all coming, being done through technology. But at that point of time, we're talking about sort of 21, 22, almost everything you tried to bring back to India. And that cost structure of India really gave you significant benefits. And not just cost structure, we also realized that, getting everything together unleashed a certain sort of collaboration across geographies, across different businesses, which when you're running a distributed function across geographies was not possible. So this was, we would say that, we were very happy to see that, there are benefits of doing this, just the collaboration that started happening across the teams. And now we have a stage where certain leaders, like the operations leader, would manage operations of hotels, vacation homes across geographies.
Wow.
Right? You can integrate that because, that collaboration made you see that, this is possible.
This is possible. No, great. So, a lot of history. Let's go into the future. given that you have seen global travel for the last decade, first of all, from the day you started till now, how do you think customers have evolved as far as travel is concerned?
See, I'm sure you would have seen and you will have different insights as well. Of course, there has been a massive evolution, right? We talked about how demand research and booking has moved to mobile, right? And there is as things move to mobile, there is a very important sort of behavior change that we have seen, which basically manifests in bookings becoming more and more last minute. Right?
Interesting.
So, as you see, the booking window, as we call in hospitality, right, that is shifting more and more towards sort of your stay dates, right? And that brings tremendous opportunities across the hospitality ecosystem. How you are geared, how do you do capacity planning? How are you geared up for sort of customer support? How do you think about your product? How do you think about your promotion stack for the customers? Almost everything needs to be thought through when the booking window is shifting, right?
But it's very difficult for the supply side, right? As in, how do they plan? They don't know like 10 days before whether their hotel is going to be full today or not.
Yeah, that's where you need to live through cycles. So, for example, in business cities, the operators are very, very comfortable with this now.
Okay.
Right. The booking curve is shifted, and I would hazard to say that now, hazard a guess and say that 10 days before, if they would have like 40 or 50% of their occupancy already in their pocket, now it would be more like, maybe 15-20%, right? That major a shift. But they are comfortable because, that cycle is very quick. You keep seeing a typical business customer, 365 days on a weekly basis, you're churning 52 times, and the ability to train yourself and for us to train them is very, very high. Leisure markets, I think, has taken some more time, and therefore you would have heard there are, always surprises. Goa, one season was a bumper season. Next season, they said, pricing was very high and demand tagged. So I think there are other factors in India as well, but this is one of the factors where stabilization has been much faster in business markets. Leisure also, for sure, that is happening. In fact, a very interesting exercise that we did at OYO. Because all our bookings are happening on the app, right? And beauty of the app bookings is you basically know the precise location when the booking actually happened. So we went ahead and did an exercise of mapping the location of the customer when the booking was being made, when the booking was made.
Okay.
And as you did this and you plotted this, all the major highways in India came alive. So you can basically see that people are driving on the road from Delhi to Dehradun, and there are a bunch of bookings happening in the summer season. So that is primarily because, it's not just last day or last week, it is basically last minute. So people are saying, I'm in the car and on the way to the destination, and I know that this product is affordable, predictable, and very easy to use. So like the last thing that I'm doing is actually booking.
Very contrary to, at least in India, where people will want to save money and hence plan ahead of time.
Yeah, and see that's again an example of that save money and plan ahead of time is a pricing and promotional stack of a different booking window.
Interesting. Very interesting. That leads to the next question, which is around customer segmentation. Generally people say budget traveler, leisure traveler, business traveler, Gen Z, Gen X. How would you segment either India or global consumer?
See, we briefly chatted about this. Hospitality is actually the most fascinating, playground when you think about segmentation. So, some segmentation happens just because of the location, right?
Okay.
So think about pilgrim cities, right? Now you are operating in Shirdi, right? So it is dominated by a certain segment. There is no experimentation needed, right there. You are talking about Banaras, you're talking about Ayodhya, right? You're talking about Tirupati. That's in hospitality. That's a major driver of demand, right? Think about between 10 to 15% of demand would be driven by pilgrimage, which is again location specific, right? So hospitality is this beautiful thing, and then there are, think again of the leisure destinations, Nainital, Bhimtal, and then Ooty, and all. So by definition of the location, you have a certain sort of understanding of sort of what customers would come there. Of course, you have to look at the customers also differently, but hospitality has a nuance, which is a positive nuance just around the location, right? Then in hospitality, there is also segmentation around sort of, are you traveling alone? Are you traveling two people on a business trip? Or is this a family, right? Just basically you are booking single room, single occupancy in a room, double occupancy, multiple rooms, right? That itself gives you an understanding of sort of the use case and who you are and what's your purpose of coming. If you are booking like 3-4 rooms, then automatically you have an understanding of sort of, what is the use case that I'm catering to. If you are booking a single room, which like a business heavy platform like OYO would be almost like 40% of our bookings, then you would know that, this is mostly looks like a business traveler going from city A to city B to grow the business. So these are nuances I thought I will bring out because, hospitality is just very unique in that respect. Then comes the typical sort of segmentation, which you have to figure out with an end goal in mind. So our end goal was also always at an asset level, right? We would figure out how to increase the RevPAR of the asset, right? That would be the first goal. And next goal, of course, would be to think about the customer and maximize the lifetime value of the customer, right? And there what we figured out that with these two goals, I need to understand something, and against that we need to have tools, right? If I have not built powerful tools for an insight, then insight is not very relevant to me. So we would never go on a wild goose chase, and we would basically limit ourselves to what are the tools we have built and what are the most effective tools. And we realized that about 80-85% of the impact for us happened through the segmentation around basically propensity to pay, of course, is there, but then on top of it, frequency and recency, right? And we would basically see you as a traveler, how frequent are you on our platform, and what is the recency with which you have sort of transacted with us or engaged with us or been on our platform. That would basically drive our pricing decisions, that would drive our promotion stack for you, that would drive our CRM for you. And that pretty much we understood got us like 85% of the benefits. Then, of course, we had a lot of other segmentations around sort of your behavior on the app. At that moment, we would try to figure out, are you booking for work or for leisure, right? You're traveling with someone or not. You are sort of, the intent is to spend this time more than what you did last time or less than what you did last time, right? A lot of these things become sort of evident with some basic sort of, pattern recognition and sort of ML on the platform, how you behave. But that said, majority of the segmentation and benefit came from frequency and recency, and that's because of the type of platform we built, right? And the tools on the platform are very powerful to basically extract, once I know your frequency and recency, my tools were built around that.
Interesting. And as travel has grown in India, do you think it is time now to, like recently we saw a vertical platform which is OYO for religious travel, right? Like, OYO for this, OYO for that. Do you think those vertical segmentation, you can build a standalone company on that?
Yeah. It's this question's been there. This question has been there for a while, Rahul. I think the answer is you can. India as a market is growing. Verticalization in every segment, including FMCG, sort of which I say bust the myth that, specialized verticals, how big can they be?
Yeah.
But they can be very big. So it is happening. It will happen. There are certain nuances on the business model that you have to take care, right? If you are an OYO type of full stack model where you own the entire inventory and you own the pricing, then the first and foremost thing, as we were chatting, is about delivering RevPAR to the hotel, which means you got to sell the entire inventory. Now, if you are a hotel, let's say in Ayodhya, it might have 90% demand, which is tourists, religious pilgrims coming from outside. But the remaining 10% for RevPAR is still important, right? So vertical platforms, how did they not lose out on any demand for a given asset? In our business model, that is the question to solve debate. But if you are building, for example, just a pure play distribution engine, another OTA, right? Then is there enough value for you to add and build an OTA which is vertical specific, right? Pilgrim or medical tourism is a great example, right? Because there are special value adds that you can provide in that vertical, right? And there are many companies doing that. So the more powerful the vertical value add that you can give in the use case, the higher the opportunity that you can actually build a business.
Either your supply first or demand first.
That
will determine this.
Correct. Choice. And if you're demand first, like what's the differentiation that you can truly create? I would say medical tourism has demonstrated that there is sort of a lot of differentiation that can be created. Is the market big enough for a large company to emerge? That we can all bet that over time it will be.
One other thing that, recently Ritesh and I were debating were on this whole zero commission model. We have seen companies like Rapido which don't charge for every every dollar of revenue they generate, but they charge a subscription fee. Or a company like Meesho, which again doesn't charge commission on every dollar of GMV, but maybe they charge for advertising or logistics services and other services, right? Given that travel, especially the hotel part, is so fragmented, do you think that there is an opportunity to build a zero commission travel business? A consumer facing, but supply side being zero commission?
See, there is absolutely an opportunity there, right? Zero commission business models get created, over a period of time, and a lot of things have to go right, right? You know that in businesses, how you imagine end state always looks possible. Like the GTM and how you get there is where all the risks lie.
Very true.
So how you get there will be a real challenge, because, for example, you have in hospitality, it is basically table stakes that you have pricing parity. So you cannot be a platform that is discounting or selling cheaper, right? So that's pretty much done. Some platforms experiment and you can get by for a few days or a few assets, but you can't really build your business thinking. You can do something different there. So price to the end customer, you can fund some discounts from your pocket, but that's also sort of, it's a strategy which only gets you that far. So there is absolutely a possibility there. You will have to play smartly around. For example, a subscription model in India, most entrepreneurs, your partners, will see that as a commission model the way they do the math, right? If I pay you X, it's like Just Dial, right? You have a subscription fee, but as a consumer, I would look at that, these many room nights, this is my saal ka kharcha, so what's my commission, right? That's how you, and whether it fits in my business model or not. So it's another way, but is it possible? I think yes, with especially I think with new age, the way you influence people and the way you acquire customer is changing, right? With Instagram and all of this. So there is an opportunity to acquire customers in a new way. And if that is there is an opportunity to create a zero commission model as well. But yeah, it's going to take a very smart and resilient entrepreneur.
That's true. That's true. One problem that is still, I don't find it solved at Helion. We had invested in a company called Mygola, trying to solve the problem overall travel plan. So there are OTAs for flights and hotels and car rentals maybe, but it stops more or less at that point of time, right? First, wherever planning on where to go, that's all loosely sometimes happening on Instagram, someplace else. Then what to do within a city, planning that itinerary, making the bookings for, let's say, a fort that I want to visit ahead of time. All those are broken experiences. Like, do you think with AI, one can now build an end-to-end travel planning company also?
I think there are companies that are doing it, right? And the risk to them is that, the models are becoming so efficient that they will do it without the company doing too much of value add. So, a lot of us, when you're planning your vacations, you at least once go to ChatGPT and say that this is my itinerary, like how can you give feedback, like what's similar, what can change, right? So that is real, that is happening. I think the larger underlying question I have always seen this is the integrated trip. In hospitality, the number of moving parts or the number of touch points which sort of affect your experience, number of touch points that with the partner or the seller on the other side, they are just massive, right? And I believe that is the reason where even in the West, an integrated platform delivering end-to-end experience, right, it's just very hard to pull off operationally, right? Because there are so many touch points, something or the other, the probability of something breaking, right, just compounding probability at a single trip level becomes meaningful, right? And in India, that itself compounds because, your ecosystems are not that mature, operators are not that mature, their perspective of thinking long-term and, their number of years of operations and how many years they intend to be in this business, all of that, when you put together, the failure points and the probabilities both increase in India. Right. And if I think what happened in the US, as you fix some of these and as the sort of failure points become very, very robust, then it becomes a DIY sort of thing, that it's so easy to just do it yourself. right? Like then you start questioning what's the value that an intermediary is adding to your trip, right? And the value is immense in India, but the problem is that intermediary, there's the probability of that value not coming through right now is very, very high. So you would have seen that, a very good example of folks who have done it right, I would say, are sort of some old school travel operators who would take trips outside India, right? And they would Thomas Cooks and Vina World and all these very specific trips, very specific itineraries, and they have repeated those sort of over years, and their partners and affiliates and everyone in that chain sort of is known, and it's so repeatable, and therefore they exclude a large set of customers because the variety is not there. Right, but then again you choose your battles, and therefore you get to pick the customers who are fine with very high predictability and low variety, and sort of that works. Will it happen or not? I think it will happen. Some base models will sort of do 95% of the work. The underlying execution, that's the question, right? There is DIY in areas where sort of it's all seamless, and then there is sort of someone doing it for you. That someone doing it for you in our ecosystem, just the failure points are very high right now.
Very interesting. And do you think AI will make most of the OTAs irrelevant? As in, you will go tomorrow on a Gemini or a ChatGPT, say book this hotel to that hotel, and the booking will get done with agentic AI at the back end?
I think technically it can happen. There are different types of customers and different types of mindset, right? Like a lot of people just derive a lot of joy in that process of discovery, in that research. They live the trip much longer than the actual trip, right? They start planning maybe 6 months in advance, and for them it's a bummer that someone will give you all the answers in one go. So they want that process of discovery. So this is just an example of a set of customers that wants to explore, right? And therefore there will always be opportunities for a platform to sort of, like an OYO, to sort of add more value to such customers, for example, right? Add more value to the point where you can decide like which room would you want to book, what's the type of view from that room, right? You can do a lot, because then you have to partner with the hotel to enable this, right? That is not something that a Gen AI model would be doing, right? And if you look at the traditional OTAs, that they have done a lot of work. What's not visible is at the back end, they work with the hotel to do a lot of work. They have sort of worked with them to figure out what is their distribution technology, right? What is the channel manager, and therefore, how does the inventory flow through seamlessly across all these platforms, right? They have worked with them, and we have worked with them to say sort of, how do you classify rooms, right? How do you build trust with the customer as far as this classification is concerned? That requires sort of almost looking at every room, measuring, communicating, deciding. So a lot of that work, what is that dimension and how can it get richer is the question for the OTAs.
Very interesting. And the last question from you, you have spent so much time in travel. If a founder were to come to you, what could be 1 or 2 areas that you will advise them to build in as far as travel is concerned?
Well, I think travel is an amazing space, right? There is just so much happening. I think there are large opportunities still, and there is always a way in which an entrepreneur differentiates and does something differently, right? I think outbound travel from India is a very, very large and growing space, right? It's a space where margin pools are high and you have nuanced customers, and therefore, again, if you think the ability to solve problems or ability to relate to the customers with certain value add is high, you can think of, right? And you rightly called out in our conversation earlier that some companies are taking the route sort of visa first route, right? Some companies would be saying that I will give you the right credit card or the card for you to travel seamlessly anywhere. So FinOps sort of related route. So there could be multiple routes, but this pool of money that is being spent by Indians traveling abroad, that is compounding at, I think between 15 to 20% CAGR. So that's a very, very big pool around which you can build something, right? I think there are still very early days for the vacation rental market in India. There are some players who exist. They have done a good job. I would still say that, it's still sort of a small market in India. This market will also grow. And how you sort of approach it and how you can build differentiation within this market there can be a lot of opportunities. The typical leisure markets are sort of expanding radially. So, Nainital is not just Nainital. There are like so many Shimla. No one wants to go and stay in Shimla now. People are like, Mashobra and even north. So that expansion is happening, and there are opportunities for new business models to come there. And OYO, we have invested a lot in building homestays and partnering with locals to do this in markets like Srinagar and other parts of Kashmir and Gujarat, and so a lot of these markets. So there are different models which will keep coming in. Now you can, again, as we were discussing, you can take this is more of a supply side view, and sort of what can you do there. There can be also a demand side view in terms of what we can do there. The demand side view is more about people spending outside, and tech side also. There will be more models. GenAI is a very clear example of sort of if GenAI has to curate trips, what sort of hotel level data do they need, and how does the hotel really get the hotel level data across, right? Those have always been questions, and sort of over time in the traditional distribution atmosphere they have been answered, but in GenAI this is another opportunity.
This is great. Abhinav, thanks for coming on and sharing so openly. So many questions in your responses. Amazing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.